Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always by my co-host Nick Filato. And today we're here to break down the All-22 film of the Giants preseason week 1 against the Lions. We are lucky, at least I consider us lucky, Nick, that from two different sources, we have access to the tape of the preseason. And we have it pretty early. I don't know when you got your access, Nick, but I got my access as early as this morning. And that's when I went to work watching the tape of this game. And I know you've also done an extensive study on the film of this game. So this is, I think, what we're going to do for the preseason. Instead of quick reaction to just what we see on the broadcast right after the game, we'll take our time like we did on this one, and we'll break down the film. And we'll do a review of the game and the film review of the game. So this is almost 24 hours after the game, a little bit less than that, 20 hours after the game. Probably what you guys can come to expect, because I think it's going to be more valuable to you guys, at least in my opinion, Nick, to give you review based on the tape rather than just what we saw in the broadcast of a preseason game. So, Nick, I will start with my main takeaway and then get to yours.
First, I want to say one thing. Next week's preseason game, it's going to be a bit delayed because I'm going to a wedding next weekend.
Yeah.
And it's actually for somebody who I think listens to this podcast because he's brought it up to me a couple times. Now, he's friends with Diana, not with me. So I don't know if this counts as a victory for Nick Filato, one of Nick Filato's friends listening to his podcast. It is more of an acquaintance of Nick Filato through Diana. But I do love this individual, and I would have been very good friends with him if I knew him in a prior life.
What's his name?
Jeff.
Jeff. What's up, Jeff? Shout out, Jeff. It's a funny past joke with Nick and I, or like a repeating joke with Nick and I, that I have 15 friends who religiously listen to this podcast, friends and family members, like a whole group chat of my friends. Shout out Steve, Kevin, Vince, who listen to this podcast pretty regularly and talk a lot about what we say, Nick. And then I also have just my family members who can constantly listen. And then the joke is on you, Mr. Filato and the Filato family. You guys don't even listen or even know what this podcast is, okay? And I've met you all, and you're very great people. But I would like a little bit of time spent, Steve, Mel, and Mr. Filato, the patriarch of the family, to spend a little bit of time. Just throw it on.
He doesn't know what a podcast is.
He doesn't, but he can learn. If the man can learn how to draft on his iPod for fantasy football, he can learn how to stream a podcast. And we'd like the support from Nick's friends and family. But you know what? It's okay. We got one here. It had to go through Diana, but at least we have somebody who Nick knows who now listens to the show. But I'm going to start here, Nick. Here's my main takeaway. And this is the thing I'm most pleased about from the first preseason game of the Giants versus the Lions. I can't remember the last time we got through even a preseason, which is insane to think about. Because we always say, it's preseason. Let's not worry too much about it. And then it just carries over almost perfectly to the regular season. It's exactly what we saw. But I can't remember a preseason like this one where the Giants' first, second, and third team offensive lines, they didn't even play any of the stars on the first team, but second and third team offensive line looked pretty damn freaking good in this one from a depth standpoint, from a player standpoint, against a Lions team that is pretty well built out from a roster standpoint, and just held their own. One screen worked, or two screens worked. They had a pretty good job in pass protection. The run game was opening up holes, was blocking cohesively and efficiently. And they've had disasters, Nick, in the preseason from an offensive line standpoint that have carried over to the regular season as early as week 1 in almost every season except 2022, basically. So I'm hoping this is a sign of things to come, because it's not just out of nowhere. They held up pretty well against the Lions in joint practices, and they've held up pretty well in the team drills in camp. I've seen Daniel Jones have a lot of time in those first team drills. So that was the main thing I took away, Nick, a physicality and a cohesiveness on the offensive line that I haven't used to seeing. And look, we've said it before, Nick, we're not the ones to sit here and be like, Bobby Johnson bad, Carmen Brasillo good, this is the whole reason. But, at some point, it's like you throw your hands up and you're like, well, things seem to be working a lot better so far with Carmen Brasillo.
Small sample size, and congratulations, Jeff, by the way. Small sample size, right? But so far, so good. Look, I saw Jalen Mayfield put good tape out there. Jalen Mayfield hasn't had positive tape since his time at Michigan. Now, this was a former third-round pick by the Atlanta Falcons, right? And the Giants brought him in, and he just has kind of flopped since he come into the NFL. He looked pretty damn good in yesterday's game. And we're going down the line. A lot of those backup offensive linemen who will likely not make the New York Giants team, they all checked a couple boxes just to be like maybe their practice squad stashes for them. There are also players like a Jake Kubis, for instance, when I was watching him, I put a couple clips on Twitter about him. I was like, this guy, man, I liked his tape at North Dakota State, but to
Yeah.
me, he kind of jumped out in this game, and he was playing with that quote unquote first team offense out there. Aaron Stinney was the only actual possible, because we don't even know, the possible first team offensive lineman who ended up playing in this game. Josh Azudu got a really bad rap, and I can see why he got beat by bad inside spin move on one play. And there were a couple other times where he was beat around the arc, but some of the sacks that he surrendered were more Drew Lock's fault, because Drew Lock tends to hold on to the football and then use his legs and try to extend these plays instead of just getting rid of the ball. And I think some of those sacks and some of those pressures that Josh Azudu was attributed was actually more on Drew Lock than it was Azudu. I'm not sitting here saying Josh Azudu is that great of a left tackle, nor do I want him to be the swing tackle of the New York Giants. But all in all, the fact that the Giants went pound for pound in a preseason game, but the fact that they went pound for pound, punch for punch with one of the toughest teams in the NFL, whose the coach's identity is all about toughness and eating kneecap, that's at least a step in the right direction. And you know what? Maybe we're grasping at straws, maybe we're not. But I will take it right here instead of just getting absolutely embarrassed like we're used to over this last decade or so.
Yeah, and it's preseason, but you want to see in the preseason your depth on the lines actually make an impact and actually just give you a shot at pass ball offense. Was the passing offense great in this game? No. But I'm a Nick. I heard a whole bad rap about Josh Azudu on Giants Twitter last night, and I went back and I watched, and I'm kind of with you, Nick. I feel like, it's aesthetically not pleasing to watch the one sack, but like at the same, and we know he's not just some all-star pass protector. He's going to evolve into one at the tackle position. But outside of that, I felt like he held his own. I thought Kubis was a great standout player by you. And I think in general, it was really the run game where it really stood out to me, this offensive line. The passing game, it is what it is at this point. I will agree with you that a lot of these plays were more on the quarterback and not just Drew Lock. I thought DeVito held the ball a little bit too long at times. This is just something that DeVito showed last year. It's something that Lock's shown at times in his career. It's the toughest thing for quarterbacks, to just process the thing fast and get the ball out of your hands to the right spot in space, leading the receiver, good timing. This stuff is difficult. It's really tough. But, ultimately, I'm going to put it more on them, and I'm a big believer in that. I think in general, sacks are way too much attributed by the public to the offensive line, when the quarterback plays a massive role in sacks and the timing of plays and if passing success happen. But in the run game specifically, Nick, I really felt like they did a really good job blocking. There's just the little things, man, like the way that a couple of the duo runs I saw, the double teams up front, the way that they kind of operate that with like the closeness and the tightness with the steps, and just with the same page cohesiveness between the guard and the center, whoever that may be. It looked different. It looked like it's a team that kind of had their timing down in the run game so far, which I just haven't seen in past preseasons.
I'm so glad you brought that up, man. It was get hip to hip with your fellow offensive lineman, flash your eyes to the threat, and then climb. It was the transitions between those double team blocks of allowing that second offensive lineman to climb up to the second level and locate the most dangerous threat. It was just crisper. And then you had those halfback delays that the Giants ran. I think they ran two. There was one to Miller, and then there was the one to Eric Ray that went for the touchdown.
Tracy got one too, did he not, at the beginning?
Tracy may have got one, but either way, the blocking I absolutely appreciated, because what have we talked about even back when Bobby Johnson was the offensive line coach in Brian Daboll's system? Getting offensive linemen free releases up to the second level. That's what those halfback delays were. On both of those, they were against wide fronts from the Lions, where the tackles to the play side climbed up, located the linebacker, and then the guard to the play side would swing around him, kind of like a fold type of block, only it's typically a little bit different, but would swing around the tackle and then handle that wide rusher and off the halfback delay. And we saw it twice, and it helped with the Eric Gray run. Now, that was to the opposite side. Eric Gray ended up hitting the right side, and the blocking there, our guy, Mekhi Wingo, absolutely love him as a pass rusher. He kind of got washed down the line of scrimmage. I think he saw a hole open up and then just panicked after the double team, and the blocking to that side was really on point from, I think it was Jalen Mayfield, and it might have been Miles, who actually looked pretty damn out there for as a backup possible swing tackle option for the New York Giants. We all penciled in Matt Nelson to be that guy. He took 2 holding penalties. He was one of the if there was a stock down player for the New York Giants, it's probably him after his performance last night. But I appreciated the Giants creating those free releases for their tackles to get up to the second level to eliminate options. We've talked about that in the past, and it's something that we saw in those halfback delays, and it's a technique that if you are able to hit that with a player like Dante Miller and you give him a crease, it's gone. We saw it with Eric Gray. Look, it was Eric Gray against Morris Norris in the hole. He made Morris Norris miss, and then Eric Gray was gone. And we know Eric Gray is the slowest back on this team right now. So when you get the football in the hands of Miller and Tracy, I think we can really see that pay dividends if those linebackers are also eliminated through creative blocking schemes up front.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the running backs in a little because there's a lot to talk about there. But I will say this about Eric Gray. He showed me a different level of separation and acceleration than I expected at it, or not acceleration, separation than I expect, breakaway ability than I expected. That long touchdown run, that defensive back had a decent angle on him, a pretty damn good angle on him. I was not expecting him to turn that into a house play, and he did turn that into a house play. I thought that was really impressive by Gray. But back to the offensive line and the cohesiveness of it, you're right. To run those types of delayed runs, those draws, you need to have the timing right. But I also thought we saw a glimpse of actual great timing in the passing game with the run, with the offensive line. On the screen pass, and I know people say, look, there were a couple screens they ran that didn't work out, and I get that. But on the one that worked out, the 20-yarder to Eric Gray, like that looked so much better. So I put a clip of it on Twitter, the All-22 of it on Twitter. That looks so much better than what I'm used to, Nick. Just like there are times where I remember against the Cowboys 2 years ago, and they had that guy who was on their offensive line for a little while. What's his name? That fringe player at guard that they had to play 1 week who like just looks so bad. Who's that dude they had in the offensive line 2 years ago?
Talk about the Giants?
Jack or something, or what's that guy's name? He's not on the team anymore.
You talk about a New York Giant or a Cowboy?
Yeah, Giants. When we were playing the Cowboys 2 years ago, when we were like, I know such a bad. It was the game where Jones missed Barkley in the flat when they were trying to mount a comeback.
I remember that game. I'm trying to
Jack something, whatever it was.
Yeah, you're talking about the guy who got his ass chewed for the false start, Jack Anderson.
Jack Anderson.
Yeah.
And he's running out in the screen game and just looks totally lost in the screen game, in space, and just timing wise. It was a fluidity issue. It was like a connectivity issue with the rest of the players. The Giants offensive line looked pretty good executing that screen to Eric Gray that went for 20. I'm just stunned to see a screen work. I don't care if it's the preseason or the regular season, Nick. The fact that we were able to watch a screen go for like 15 to 20 is a really good sign for me, for this offensive line.
It did go for 13, but I'll take 20. We can sit here and
I'll take 13. We've been getting like
give it a little bit more. It was really Schlottman and Kubis who were the lead blockers, and Schlottman did an excellent job getting out there, staying square to his target, contacting this poor, almost defenseless defensive back. And then Kubis comes and just absolutely buries this guy in the dirt after he buried his initial assignment in the dirt. He had to hold that guy up at the point of attack, right? Fake like he's just blocking, and then he tossed him to the ground. So that was an excellent rep. I think I put it on Twitter from the UDFA out of North Dakota State. But yeah, the offensive line in general, I was impressed, and I never thought I would say that. Now, the only thing is, we got to be objective here. Can the first team offensive line, who I remain high on relative to the way they've played in recent memory, would they be able to do that against the first team Lions? Lee McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson, and all of these talented players. And that still remains a question mark. But again, I have more hope for that with the additions of Runyon and Jermaine Illuminor. And hopefully once John Michael Schmitz comes back, and even if he doesn't, you have Greg Van Roten, which is going to force Aaron Stinney into the lineup, which isn't the worst situation because we've had players like Jack Anderson in recent memory for the New York Giants.
And we'll see what happens once we get a chance, which I think will be this next preseason game, by the way, Nick, to get a look at the first team O-line. I think we're going to finally get some snaps there. And it may not feature everybody because, Joe Shane mentioned that John Michael Schmitz is close to returning, but,
I doubt he'll be there.
I doubt it too. And he said the same thing about Evan Neal at the beginning of training camp. We haven't seen Neal once. Didn't make much mention of Neal last night either. So we'll see what happens on the front of those.
Are you a little worried about that, you think?
I'm very worried about Neal and JMS, to be honest.
Well, Neal, I'm putting Neal out of my mind right now. It's like when he comes back, it's like, all right, we'll see. But with JMS, I'm like, yo, what's going on?
Shoulder concerns last year, shoulder concerns this year, and the shoulders, you need to have no shoulder concerns to play a physical position like offensive line in the NFL. So it's a very, very big concern. I'm almost wondering if they're like trying to make it, like get him back on the field through rest, no surgery, as that would be like the last option, obviously. I don't know the extent of it, though. I'm not a doctor, but we'll see what happens here. All I know is this. They signed Van Roten. He's only taken snaps at center. So obviously there's some level of concern with the Giants over John Michael Schmitz's, future right now, short-term future, I should say. But not according to Joe Shane. He says he'll be back soon. So hopefully he's not lying. I don't know. Time will tell on that front. But I am excited to see this first team unit, to be honest, because it's not just because of how well the second team and third team unit played relative to my expectations, but because I think Carmen Brasillo has had a really big, quick impact on the way that this team is operating together. And I think in the end, like with offensive line, everyone's going to be taught something different, Nick. You're going to have some guys look good under one system. Some guys look bad under another system for whatever it may be. But if you can just get that cohesiveness down, like if everyone's operating on a similar page, that to me makes the bigger difference of that from a communication standpoint out of everything, both in the pass game and the run game. So we'll see what happens there. Anything else in the offensive line?
One thing, and I'm not saying this to throw shade at any New York Giant, but Marcus McKethan was working with the third team, and I was just watching him in preseason against the Lions, third team again, right? And I'm thinking about some of these guys ahead of him on the depth chart, and I'm like, yo, I can't believe Marcus McKethan had to start week 3
right
against the 49ers. Like, what a bad situation for the Giants to find themselves in, and what an unfortunate situation for McKethan, who had to recover from a torn ACL in his rookie season in the previous season. Like, that was the reality of the Giants offensive line last year. Because I think these players who are above him on the depth chart, they're going to make the team, I think, over a player like him at this point. Too. So it really kind of does put into perspective just how dreadful last season was, if we even needed that to be put into perspective, because I'm pretty sure Giant fans are well aware of it at this point.
Yeah, we're talking about a late day 3 pick being forced to come off a major surgery injury and try to start right away against the best or second or third best defensive line in the NFL. It's an absurd task to put in front of him. And they had Ezeudu at left tackle that game as well, which was nightmares. Though they did have Ezeudu at left tackle against the Bills, and the Giants were able to generate some explosive plays against the Bills that next week or the week after, whenever that was. So
wasn't that the game he got hurt?
Yeah, and then Pugh had to step in at left tackle.
It was like 11 plays into the game, too.
Oh, yeah, true. So maybe that was Justin Pugh at left tackle. I don't even remember putting it past my memory. But regardless, the situation was horrible last year. And that's part of why I'm happy that they have this abundance of depth. I don't want to call it abundance of riches, Nick. We're not the Eagles.
No.
Line all of a sudden or whatever. But, you know, it is an abundance of depth that they haven't had. Second-ish type guys that could step in and play and maybe be all right on the offensive line. And we have actual battles to think about. Evan Neal, right tackle, or Illuminor, right tackle. Evan Neal, guard, or another player at guard. Will they give Stinney a chance at guard, or is Van Ruten going to play guard? And Runyon and JMS. Like, there's actual guys to put in outside of the tackle position, which is, again, not deep, but not really deep across the board on any NFL team, in my opinion. So I like where they're at there. It's a good step in the right direction. There's been positive signs in camp, and there were positive signs in joint practice. That's all we can go by right now. This does not mean it's going to translate to the regular season. We're not saying that, Nick, nor I. But what we are saying is when it's been awful in the preseason in the past, it was awful in the regular season. So at least we're over that hump, the hump of bad preseason offensive line play, at least for now, though. We shouldn't say we're over it just yet. We'll see in the next preseason game for sure. Against another really good defensive line, by the way, with a lot of depth. So it's going to be a really big challenge for the Giants, the second preseason game. But Jets are second game, right? Or Jets third?
No, Houston.
Never mind. That is a good line, but I was thinking it was Jets. That's going to be the one where we'll really see that. Though, again, I don't even know if they'll play starters that game. NFL preseason's so weird these days, Nick. Like, it's really evolved into something so different than what it was when I grew up.
They're going to play starters next week against Houston.
And then I don't know about week 3.
Probably not.
Yeah, so it's a thing where you play them just like they used to play them week 2 for like a quarter, then week 3 for like the whole half, the starters, and then nothing in 4 and 1. But now it's just one game, and I doubt we'll even go the whole half. So it's very interesting to see how they've done that. Teams are, I guess, very concerned about the injury front, which I don't blame them for that, Nick. But let's move on to another position here. Running backs, man. I'm starting to get pretty excited about this running back core, or corpse, as I used to say, or still at times do make the mistake of saying. But look, Tyrone Tracy got the start. You said it best when we discussed training camp practice you were at last week. He's been the one that's gotten the most. Tyrone Tracy, I thought, looked pretty damn good, to be completely honest. I thought he was decisive. I thought he was patient. I thought he showed not only burst, but the ability to get skinny when he needs to get skinny, and some yards after contact upside upon getting hit. Really good contact balance. And I've known all these things, but I like the first 2 parts of it. The processing aspect, the patience, and letting his blocks get set up. Then Eric Gray comes in and steals the show, because Eric Gray's a guy we've talked a lot about. Maybe is he on the bubble? Maybe is he not? And, you know, if you put together a performance like that, almost 100 total yards in a half, dude, and not even a full half, because Tracy started almost 100 yards in less than a half, you're going to put yourself in the mix to make this roster no matter what. And I'll tell you what, when it comes to Eric Gray, the screen passes were nice. He looks like a natural receiver. We said this throughout his tape. But that touchdown run he had was a really really impressive from start to finish, including the breakaway, the ability, like I said, to erase that angle. I thought the DB had a nice angle on it. And I've seen plenty of backs not run that down and be tracked down and be stopped inside the 10 or whatnot. He housed that. So, and then obviously Miller, who now that we've seen it, you've seen it in practice, Nick, but now that we've seen it in a real game, you could see the burst. I think you just, before we started recording, put up a clip of his run, of one of his runs, Nick, his longest run. And that's just like, and that acceleration stopped the start. It's different than Gray. It's different than Tracy, and it's different than Singletary. So again, it's like part of this committee that offers different things. Everyone has their own flavor, but we're going to get to, I think, experience all of it, I hope, because I really think all four should make the roster if it's up to me. And I do believe that personally. So what are your thoughts on what you saw last night from the backs?
Great on Eric Gray, man. He needed that kind of performance. It's the exact performance he needed. I think the only other thing that would have been a little bit reassuring is if Eric Gray had this like epic blitz pickup, but it's not even like the Giants were really throwing the football all that much. And when they were throwing the football, they were targeted at Eric Gray. They weren't stretching the field. It was wet. It was windy. It was gross. They were focusing on running the football and a lot of stuff near the line of scrimmage. Brian Dable did not want to get into his bag of tricks at all. It was the most rudimentary offense. Slant flat, curl flat. Hey, it's a mesh spot wheel. Remember that play? It was a lot of just, install day one type of plays for the New York Giants offense. And I'm not complaining about that. But Eric Gray showed the receiving skills, not just on that screen, which is pretty simple, but that wheel route. That's a tough catch. I watched the Giants run that several times in training camp, the wheel. Some of them were to Eric Gray. And Eric Gray hauled that in, and that was on a 3rd and 7, I believe. It was on 3rd down, though. What is the one thing we say about Eric Gray? He can make you miss in an elevator. He can make you miss in a phone booth because he is very agile and he's very good faking safeties out with his upper body, right? Because he has a very hard juke. He just doesn't really have the speed. Showed a little bit more speed than we thought.
Yeah.
In yesterday's game when he did outrun. And then after practice, we were all in the media. We were in the locker room talking with him. He was saying, look, he didn't flat out say this, but this is what I interpreted. And you can go to YouTube and check it out because it's up there now on Giants YouTube page. Like last year, maybe I complicated things because he's like, look, I just need to simplify. I know how to play football. I've been playing this game since I was 4 years old. I just go out there and I'll get ball, I can play football, and I know I can do that, right? Basically saying like last year, maybe, I was overcomplicating some things. I think the Giants are a little bit at fault for that, for trying to pigeonhole him into a role that isn't necessarily natural for him, being a punt returner. But this is exactly what he needed. I'm not sure if the Giants are going to carry 4 backs. I can see that happening, right? But it could be
they need a fullback and they need one of these tight ends to play that role. It's going to be Bellinger, maybe Manners. You're right. It's super complicated.
It is complicated. And I know they love, and Shane Bowen has referenced this, some of the defensive linemen up front. And you want a rotation there because you don't really have a certainty behind Dexter.
The line, they kind of want to have some depth there too.
Want to have some depth there. Wide receiver, they're probably going to carry at least 6, right? Yeah,
that's the one I think they might cut from, but yeah.
So it's going to be hard, and I think it's valuable to have Dante Miller. But I don't know if how much can you put on Devin Singletary's plate, who is going to be your 1A, right? And how much can you put on his plate? Because Eric Gray is going to I would say profiles a little bit more as that like 3 down type of back if something were to happen to Singletary. I don't think he'd get that because Tracy is still there. But I don't know if the Giants view Tracy as that type of player. So keeping Eric Gray, especially after this preseason performance, he might not slip through waivers as easily as we previously thought. It might be of the interest of the New York Giants to keep Eric Gray on the roster. So I just think this complicates things for the Giants, but in a good way. This is a good situation for them to find. You want competition. But I know Miller, man, if Miller had that hole that Gray had, I think it's the same exact result. And I'm not saying
I wonder, because that move was really special by Gray.
It was very special.
Yeah.
It was very, I just think, and I'm not taking anything away from Gray. I think that was a special move. Kind of a suspect angle from Morris Norris, though.
Very suspect angle.
So I think Miller might be able to outrun Norris up the sideline.
Straight up to the sideline. I believe that too.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at there. Okay. And look, I'm much more enthusiastic, as every Giant fan is right now, about Eric Gray and his possibility of making this roster. Whereas last week I was like, I don't know, he has to pass protect, but he proved something in this preseason week 1 game.
And I'll say this, if it's up to me, I'm probably going with 3, and I'm probably keeping Gray over Miller is where I'm at right now. But that's a stock up, stock down type of situation, and that's fluid, and that could change. I don't want to lose Miller, but at this point, I don't want to lose Gray because I just think back, Nick, we watched a lot of tape from Gray since he's one of the draft picks, and he had good tape, man. He had really freaking good tape, and I don't want to just forget about any of that and throw all that out.
It's so funny, too. I don't know which game it was, and I'm kicking myself because I'm usually pretty good with this kind of shit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna find it, man. He had that same exact juke in open space against a defender and left him in the dust.
Yeah,
man. I remember before the Giants
put it on Twitter too, if I remember that play.
I think so. Yeah, I gotta find that, man. It was
type into like Twitter, like from Nick Filato, Eric Gray. You might find it.
Is that how you work Twitter? I gotta figure out how to do that.
Yeah, you just do from and then your name and colon, or your username and then colon. But
where does the colon go?
Right after your username.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
This is a Nick dirty joke. It might be, and went right over my head if possible. But I will say this. I'm here now, Nick. I've arrived. We finally have a committee approach at running back, and I never want to go back. I'll tell you that. I want to keep it like this. We are investing $1 million against the cap. Like Tyrone Tracy's a late round pick. Devin Singletary actually cost a little bit of cap. Miller doesn't cost any cap. Gray doesn't cost any cap. This is what I want. I'll build my running game through cohesive blocking and through improving my offensive line and my blocking scheme and my wide receiver blocking and everything from that. Because I know in the NFL, you can find talent late at running back. Tyrone Tracy is a talented athlete. He's a physical specimen. Eric Gray may not be a physical specimen, but he is a talented running back. He can set up blocks. He can make people miss in a phone booth, and he can do things like we saw last night, like catch out of the backfield as well. And Miller is a talented back from an acceleration burst standpoint. You can find running back talent. You do not need to invest this heavy dose in running back talent of draft capital and running back and then, give him 86% of the snap share and wear him down. It just doesn't seem like a play for me ever again. And I'm happy that they're gone with it. I don't think Joe Shane will ever go back to the old way that Dave Gettleman built out here. And I'm just excited because I get to watch all these talented players, and that's not something I got to do in the past. And so, look, they may not be Saquon Barkley. They're obviously not Saquon Barkley, but they all offer something different to the Giants.
And what about this wide receiver room?
Well, did you see the Nate Tice clip? I love that. Did you get a chance to see it?
No, I didn't see it. What do you put up?
First professional play of Malik Neighbors' career, and he's throwing his hand up, LOL, because it is like Neighbors runs his route and has the hand up immediately, like I'm open. So
yeah,
just a funny.
I saw people debating on Twitter, saying something like, "Oh, Malik Neighbors wasn't open on those plays that Drew Lock didn't throw the ball," because it was.
The only one I agree with was the time when they had the 2 high safety shell and they had the safety over the top. That one was not. I like that.
There were 2 times where I was like, a very good quarterback could get it there, but they were clowning him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. To get it there, but that's
the one that I think was really circulating though. Malik Neighbors went past the flat defender and was starting to run towards the sideline, and the cover 2 safety was past the hash at that point.
Right.
But if you put that football to the sideline, that's where it would be completed. But that's also
that's like the Burrow Mahomes guys makes those throws.
Exactly.
So that are on their roster don't make those throws.
For us to say that, but like it's a very difficult throw, and it has to come out.
Was it DeVito or Lock at that point? Neither is making that throw.
Yeah, it was Lock, but
you gotta not only you have to have anticipation on that, you have like serious anticipation to make that throw, but you gotta have like trajectory to get it over the underneath defender and the velocity, like ball placement, so much on that Drew Lock unfortunately does not have in his bag of tricks, at least not frequently. But yeah, other receivers that stood out to you, I was just bringing up Neighbors just to show, he played some snaps, nothing too crazy there. And any other receivers that stood out to you? It wasn't a big receiver game.
No, it wasn't. I mean, Allen Robinson's a player that stacked twice. I counted. The ball did not come. Well, the ball came his way the one time, and I think DeVito was right. Like Allen Robinson, it was a 3rd down. So Allen Robinson got to the sticks and then turned and flowed to the sideline, and the cornerback was kind of put in a spin cycle. He was not in position, but Robinson could have took it vertical and he would have had vertical leverage, but he decided to cut the route off short. DeVito threw it like it was deep. I think that might have been on Allen Robinson, but I'm unsure. Logic points me to DeVito since he's the younger player. But again, I'm a little bit unsure. It was just a miscommunication, chalk it up to the preseason. And there was another play other than the catch that he had from Drew Lock where he stacked and he was running down against cover 1 open, and Lock didn't fire the football, which again, the read wasn't probably to Allen Robinson. But the fact that Allen Robinson is winning off the line of scrimmage and establishing vertical leverage against a cornerback in man coverage is something that is positive at this point. A 30-year-old receiver who doesn't necessarily have the athletic profile that he may have had in the past. So Allen Robinson is somebody that stood out, but it's kind of hard to sit here and be like, oh, who else stood out? Because they didn't throw the freaking football all that often down the field. A lot of it was just to the running backs, right? Or the tight end. But I'll also say this, man. It's going to be interesting to see the Allen Robinson versus Isaiah Hodgins debate through this summer. And I think there is probably a roster spot between those two. But Dan, they love Isaiah Hodgins and his ability to block. And we've seen this for 2 years now. And we saw it again on the touchdown run to Eric Gray. He is a damn physical blocker. They love when he is coming down the line of scrimmage and he is blocking down on somebody on these pinball concepts. So I don't know if it's a done deal. Oh, actually, I do know it's not a done deal between Allen Robinson and Isaiah Hodgins, but that is something that we have to pay attention to through these next 2 preseason games.
You're right about that, Nick. And it's something that I think, toward Allen Robinson personally. Not that, and I love Isaiah Hodgins. I know at this point in the Giants' career, they've moved on past Hodgins being a big piece in their offense by drafting Neighbors and Hyatt. Like, that was their decision to use that capital. And I like both of those players too much. I don't know if I see the path. And I like the idea of having Robinson on this roster from a veteran standpoint in season.
I love a great deal as much as the next guy. But I'm not going to enter a parallel universe or go through some elaborate labyrinth just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. It's easy to switch to. The website has a good interface. I have a couple buddies who have recommended this to me. They speak highly of Mint Mobile. Get started. Go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That is 3 Bs. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. 3 Bs, triple B. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter. to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
But I want to get to another position here on the offense. We've done O-line. We'll circle back at the end of quarterbacks. Let's get to tight end. So this one's the one that's intrigued me the most. You've been at practice. I have not been at practice. This is something I feel like I hope I would have picked up if I was at practice, but I wasn't able to. So I'm happy I now have game film that I can watch. And I watched the broadcast angle last night. And by the way, one quick shout out before I get into this, Nick. Quick shout out, Phil Simms, unbelievable addition to the broadcast crew. I feel like he adds exactly the energy they needed. Not to take anything away from what they had already, which was already an excellent offering, but I think the Phil Simms edition was a really smart one and a really good job there. And I actually hoping that Phil's going to be at every year for CBS Sports, we do like the NFL Summit at the beginning of the year, and I'm going to that next week. And I've met Phil and have talked to Phil there before, but I'm hoping he's going to be there again this week. He's sometimes there, sometimes not, with Boomer and everybody, because I want to talk to him about that, like how that, and I want to tell him that so he knows, and he doesn't need to know, but he needs some positive. Everybody needs a little positive reinforcement in their life. And I just feel like he added a lot. But let me get to the point I was going to make at the tight end position. Having watched the tape and having watched the broadcast angle, I like the way Tyree Jackson moves on tape. And I think that Tyree Jackson is the exact kind of developmental tight end that you should want to have on your roster. And I posted about a play he made. It was the play that the pass he caught in space that led to the Eric Gray touchdown, where he almost got him but didn't get in. Here's the deal with Tyree Jackson. He's 6'7", 250, with 4.59 speed, 90th percentile arm length, near 90th percentile wingspan, and 90th percentile hand size. If you built a tight end out of the lab, this is what you would want to build him as. And then Tej Seth, I'm sure you know him, Nick, and some people listening might know him. He's Tej FB Analytics on Twitter, a big analytics guy, retweeted me and said, take a look at Tyree Jackson's elite RAS score entering his age 26 season. After converting from college quarterback, which, by the way, he made the switch in 2021, came out in 2019, made the switch from quarterback to tight end in 2021, so he's still relatively new to the position. We know for a fact from Julian Edelman and other players who have converted from receiver to quarterback that if you're converting from receiving option, tight end, from quarterback to receiver, if you're converting from quarterback to a receiving option, tight end receiver, you tend to see the field better, specifically against zone. The same thing happened with Luke McCaffrey, who came out this year and was drafted by Washington. And I saw that on his tape. And his zone grade was second best of all wide receivers last year in college football. You tend to read zone better. So keep that in mind when it comes to Tyree Jackson. But in addition to that, the 90th percentile hand size, arm length, wingspan, 6'7", 250, which is rare, 4.59 speed. He had a 9.31 RAS score on the 20-yard split and a 9.36. These are elite grades on the 10-yard split. His short shuttle was 4.28. That was a good grade nearing elite. 3-cone, 7.09, almost under 7 there. Broad jump, 8.6 RAS grade, so in the great category there. And he moves like that on tape from what I've seen so far. To me, Nick, it's not even a question for me. I want to develop this type of player for the Giants. I am more concerned about long-term than short-term. For me, if it comes down to him and Cager, I don't even care. I want him over Cager long term. I know what Cager can be. I've seen what Cager can be, and I understand he's got a lot more speed than Tyree Jackson. But Cager to me is a very niche guy. If we're talking about we don't want Miller on this team, Turbo Miller, because he's too niche and he's just going to be there to help you for a few.
I don't even think he is niche, Turbo.
I don't either. But if that's what the narrative is, I'm with you on that. I think he can play the full running back spectrum.
I thought he was before I went to training camp, and then I kind of started watching him a little bit more, and I was like, no, this guy. Yeah.
But that was kind of the narrative on him. I agree that you don't feel that way, and we may not feel the way. I'd like to watch more to know that. But I kind of feel like Cager is a pretty niche player. He can help you for some snaps. He's a big red zone guy because of his speed. Fine mismatches, fine. But I'd rather try to develop this 6'7" freak with an elite RAS score who looks like he moves well in space. That's just me if I'm building out a roster. So he's a sleeper for me. I'm excited to watch him. Ultimately, I think they'll go with Cager over him because they love Cager, but that's just not the route I would personally go. And I'm fine deferring to them. Obviously, they see more than me, and hopefully they can keep Tyree Jackson on the practice squad and continue to develop him. But, man, this guy looks to me like an actual prospect that you could, like a real big-time developmental prospect with that kind of size and movement skills.
Giants currently have 3 former quarterbacks, or 2 of them are still quarterbacks, on their roster that were at the Senior Bowl in 2019.
By the way, I love the idea of Tyree Jackson making the roster, finding each role, and then you know what I'm talking about, developing some real intriguing plays, a little trick play once a game, where you throw it behind the line of scrimmage to him and you let him throw the football. This dude had a cannon, by the way, at Buffalo. Like, I was like intrigued by him as a quarterback prospect back in the day, just based on the raw tools. Or you have like the really interesting one that like we've seen Andy Reid debut once and hasn't brought back. You have Tyree run like a little curl in space, throw him the football, have him make the catch, and then have him gun it across the field behind him across the field for a lateral to like Malik Neighbors on the other side of the field and let him go one-on-one and house it. Like, I'm already intrigued by all that, but it's mostly for me the size, the profile, the elite athletic score, the conversion from quarterback to tight end. I just see a much, much higher ceiling for him than like a Lawrence Cager, for example.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think Lawrence Cager has a higher ceiling, but I see what you're saying, right? Like that ceiling needs to be actualized. He has a massive ceiling because of everything that you laid out.
Also, a much worse floor.
Yeah. The Giants seemingly do not see it that way because Lawrence Cager was playing so many first-team reps before he went down in training camp. It's going to come down, like Tyree Jackson standing on the roster comes down to Lawrence Cager's health. Sure. Tyree Jackson played a lot of snaps yesterday because the Giants didn't want to play Theo, Manhertz, and Bellinger on all those snaps late in the third quarter, and Jack Stoll is also out. So Tyree Jackson's getting all that he can be fed right now, which is good for his development, but there's only, a finite amount of spots on this roster, and I don't believe Tyree Jackson cracks that unless there's some injuries.
I don't think it's going to happen. There's politics in play, and Cager has proven himself more, and he knows the system better.
I want to say that Cager and like is very tight with Daniel Jones too.
Yeah, there's a connection there too. Yeah. They've shown some decent rapport at times. Look, Cager is going to have.
No, I mean like dating back to before they were on the Giants, like dating back to like their college days and stuff.
Possible. I don't know about that. And look, I could be overrating what Tyree Jackson's ceiling could be. I just know that the 6'7" guys that move like that are very rare. And if they're actualized, they become real weapons in the NFL, not these niche guys who can help you with an occasional play here or there. I don't think either of them can really block that well, but at least Tyree Jackson has a frame to eventually learn blocking, in my mind, at least.
And that size and that length just in the red zone.
That's what I mean. Right. Exactly. That size and the length red zone to me is more valuable even than the speed, personally, than what Cager provides. But that is up to the coaches, and I fully believe Cager will win that. But either way, he's now a sleeper for me, and I'm excited to watch him the rest of the
Stash him on the practice squad, see what happens, right?
Yeah, the Eagles tried to do it. Good find.
And we sniped him.
What'd you say?
And then we sniped him.
Right, exactly. And then we sniped him, and I actually think it's a good find. I agree, though. He probably won't. A couple other wrinkles, though. We were kind of promised that we'd see, from Carm Brasilla's days with Las Vegas, that we'd start to see some fullback usage in this offense. It wasn't a big factor in past years. And Daniel Bellinger lined up as a fullback and had a really good block on one of the Tyrone Tracy runs last night. So we're starting to see that that's kind of a role they have out for Daniel Bellinger. He's going to be kind of a jack of all trades tight end for the Giants, playing even in a game like this one, because they probably don't have anyone yet that they trust within that specific role.
And he's good at it too. He's very good at that role.
Yeah, he's the guy for that role. And so that means almost definitely, I think he's not that we ever debated this, but he'll be a sure roster lock. And It's going to be interesting to see what they do with that tight end room in the regular season from a rotation standpoint, because I do agree with something that you've said on a past podcast, might be a future podcast, but we'll call it a past podcast, a past recording, about how the Giants are going to want to look to use 12 personnel for mismatch purposes because of the division that they play in with some of the slower linebackers. So I'll just be interested to see which two they mix and match at the tight end position, and ultimately how many they keep. Any other thoughts from you on what you saw from the tight ends last night?
The tight ends, no, not necessarily. I think Chris Manhertz might have a bigger role than maybe we anticipated, and that just goes through just watching training camp and then also seeing how he's playing a lot with that first team. So
Yes.
Manhertz, but you got to weigh this. It's like, how much of that is Theo Johnson being a rookie and Theo Johnson getting a little bit of a late start to camp?
Okay, and yeah, anything, I guess, before we go to defense, anything on quarterbacks then, or not much yet?
I think Locke looked like he looked throughout training camp, a little bit indecisive, doesn't like his first read, just kind of bails and runs around a lot and just scrambles. That's kind of been what I've seen from Drew Locke throughout training camp. Like the reports that, I don't think it was a report, but people suggested that he should take first team snaps over Daniel.
It was just Connor Hughes was the one.
Yeah, I think Connor said that. And I think that was after the pretty bad Daniel Jones practice.
Yeah, right.
But everything I've seen, it's not a question. Daniel Jones is like the clear cut starter. It's not even in question. Daniel Jones needs to fall flat on his face like a few times for Drew Locke to get entertained.
The situation is just so different than it was last year. They don't have Tyrod Taylor anymore, and there's a massive drop off.
And you called that a while ago too.
Yeah. It just is what it is. They couldn't afford Taylor. They tried. You saw it. Joe Shane put him as one of his big 6 guys in Hard Knocks. There were 6 guys they put as their elite targets in free agency. They got they got 4, I think, of them, 4 of the 6. They wanted Tyrod, and he got priced out. And that's just what it is. The Jets offered him more than the Giants could afford after making the Runyon signing and the Illuminor run signing, which in both cases, they had to offer a little bit more than they wanted to both Runyon and Illuminor. And, it all works out. There's the cap situation. I mean, that's the deal with the NFL salary cap. You're going to have to make your concessions. And QB2 was a concession for the Giants here. There's no doubt about it, because it was clearly pointed out to us on Hard Knocks by Joe Shane. And it is what it is. But on DeVito, I liked the wheel route he threw. I thought it was a simple concept, but he executed it well. The timing was good. The touch was good. And he put it in a good spot. But outside of that, my issue with DeVito is a lot of what I saw on film toward the end of his run last year as a Giants starter. He holds the ball too long, man. A lot of these it's the crux. It's the kryptonite for every quarterback who struggles in the NFL across the board, preseason, regular season, anything you want to go by. They just hold the ball too long. They don't know where to go with it. They don't know how to get rid of it fast and on time. And that's all of quarterbacking, it seems like to me.
That slant that he had to Tyree Jackson, that was pretty nice. He put it behind the linebacker back shoulder. Tyree Jackson had to spin and catch it, but he was able to get that around a linebacker who was almost in perfect position to defend that exact pass.
Yeah, that was a good throw. He seemed to have a nice rapport with Tyree. They've obviously been working together a bunch of camps, so that helps too. The throw he had, was it him who had? No, it was Locke who had the throw to Allen Robinson. That was a decent throw on the outside. That was okay. But it wasn't much of a passing game, so we don't have much on these quarterbacks. Though I will say this: Drew Locke is injured, and from what Brian Dable said about an hour ago, it seems like this is going to be a week-to-week thing, not a day-to-day thing. So Brian Dable mentioned they might have to bring in a quarterback. At this point, I don't know who the hell that's going to be.
Hey, is it Nathan York, eh?
Yeah.
Nathan Rourke, bring him back.
I guess so. Who is that guy they signed? Was that the guy they signed from like the D3 guy?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. I like that guy. I want that guy. So watch one 5-minute highlight of him on YouTube. This dude has a little bit of arm talent. Get me in. Good. Bring him into camp. I mean, but obviously, all jokes aside, the Giants QB situation is behind Daniel Jones is not what we had hoped it would be. I don't think at this point. I guess it's fine if we have to turn to DeVito if Jones gets hurt again. And Jones, again, has been hurt every year but one. So it's something that you have to at least keep in mind. But I don't feel that confident with the QB2 situation, QB2-3 situation at all for 2024 personally.
Yeah. It's Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones is who he is at this point.
Got to stay healthy.
But you know what? He has a very good supporting cast, so we could possibly see a much better version of Daniel Jones than we have seen. And it's safe to say that. It's just, what's the ceiling of that Daniel Jones? And
that's QB1 discussion. That we can get to. I'm just mostly focused right now. I'm talking about the QB2-3 like that. Oh, yeah. It's not what it was last year. It's just, I see a noticeable difference. Like if he gets hurt again, Jones, we are and we could be going back to the Fromm days. And I don't want to say that.
No.
If you don't prove competent, we're not going to ever go back to the Fromm days. But I don't know. That's before anybody had tape on DeVito too. That's the big thing to think about. Like, it could get ugly, I think, if he has to play too much of the game. So hopefully Jones can stay healthy.
So Locke is a better backup quarterback than any quarterback the Giants have had recently, other than Tyrod, I would say.
Sure.
Right?
Yes, because they haven't invested high in that yet.
And DeVito might even be in that conversation because, like, well, Mike Glennon, like, he had his like little run, but it just floundered down the stretch. But his offensive line was rough, and that guy had no mobility at all. And then that led to Big Fromm, and that was just a disaster. So
I think Glennon, what DeVito and Locke offers about what Glennon still had some nice throws, some back shoulders, some rips down the field. Like, obviously he sucks in other ways, but like DeVito then holds the ball too long, can't really stretch the field. Locke runs around, can't really get the ball. Like, there's major issues, I think, with all of them. And Tyrod had his own issues too, but Tyrod also had the 8th best grade last year, EPA, from a clean pocket, and he had one of the highest explosive pass rates in the NFL. These guys aren't offering us that, I don't think, Locke or Glennon or DeVito, unfortunately. So hopefully Jones can just stay healthy, man. This is the year to stay healthy, revive his career, because he's going to be better, I think. This could be a big season for Jones, I hope.
I also think Locke can show more than he has.
Sure, yeah.
I think once he gets a little bit more used to the playing with these wide receivers in this offense, if he's behind a first-team offensive line, it might be a little bit better for him.
Fair.
But as of right now, Jones is the undisputed number one.
I think that's all fair. Maybe we can still see a little bit better out of Locke. All right, let's flip to the defense side of the ball. Where do you want to start there? What stood out the most to you?
Deontay Johnson, baby. Deontay Johnson did that little steady drum beat. He had 4 tackles, I think. One was at the line of scrimmage, 2 were TFLs, or maybe one was, and then he had the sack, which really was just an excellent play by Dane Belton. Look, Dane Belton, it's his job to lose, is what Shane Bowen said about him, but it's going to be hard for him to lose that job, even though I think Newbin is going to end up taking it eventually, when he's making plays like he made against the Lions on that play action rollout, because the entire defense was going to the left except for Dane Belton, because Dane Belton saw the tight end release and go on the drag, got right to the hip. Right when Sudfeld turned, he's like, oh, where's my tight end? He's going to be open. No one's going to be on him. And Belton's just right there. And you see Sudfeld like, oh, what? And then Newbin closes down on the horizontal cross at the intermediate level. And then he's just like, oh shit. Oh no. And then Deontay Johnson just boom, hits him, drills him into the deck. And Deontay, man, big guy, long, physical. I think he's probably going to make this roster, and he could earn some snaps on defense.
Sure.
You brought this up, I think, like a month ago or so, Dan, about like, hey, we love Micah McFadden, but this is a new defense. He struggled when he first came into the NFL with Wink Martindale. He definitely took strides last year, but we shouldn't be so certain to pencil him in as a starter that cannot be challenged. Deontay Johnson, that could be a challenge for Micah McFadden, especially if McFadden doesn't get back onto the football field for a full go here in the coming weeks. I'm not saying he has to start the preseason game if he's not fully healthy, but if he goes into the season just a little hampered, that's not great for this kid.
No, you're right. And let's be honest, we don't really typically see guys who have this steady of a drumbeat, and that means start of training camp into joint practices and into preseason. All positive, moving in the right direction for Deontay Johnson. You don't see guys like that miss the roster. So I think at this point, he's a very close to near lock to make the roster if he stays healthy. Now it becomes, will he play? Will he get regular season playing time over McFadden? And that's the interesting debate, because it's preseason, man. We don't want to make too much of it because he's obviously not going against first team competition, Deontay Johnson, last night. But he looked the part last night. It's not just that he looks the part. He played the part. The one run stop I put up on Twitter, the All-22 of that was one of the best plays I've seen by a Giants linebacker, point blank stop, in the last 5 years, preseason or regular season. I don't care about the competition. Like, the way that he read that out and the way that he positioned himself to make that tackle and get himself in the right position, that looked like high processing in addition to good downhill explosion. He plays hard as a mother downhill, like he is driving downhill. So Deontay Johnson could be a really fun back end find by the Giants, at the type of moves that define your season. When you're a team like this, it's counted out. Vegas has you at 6 wins or whatever, and you end up making that run to the playoffs like the Giants did 2 years ago with the same coach. It's guys like this who make the difference, in my opinion, in the season. So I'm very excited about Deontay Johnson's development. And
to build on that, I felt like Darius Muasau had a good game as well. Darius Muasau
even looked good, by the way. Like, all the linemen had some moments.
Yeah, man. Him at the line of scrimmage, he had a couple fills, a couple sticks. He was shooting gaps, forcing combo blocks to peel before I believe they really wanted to, which allowed the initial defender who was blocked to have a bigger impact, more to the play side. And then him in coverage. he had a couple plays off play action where he roboted, roll over and back. That's what robot means. That means you spin around, you look for crossers coming behind you because you realize it's a passing concept and not a run. It's a way to assist yourself to defend the pass after initially playing a run off play action. It's a linebacker technique. And he rolled over and back, and I put it on Twitter. He could have easily, he saw someone streaking up the seam. He could have easily panicked and closed width to get that streak, but he trusted the defense's continuity and knew that streaking player, even though he was open briefly, was going to run himself right into the safety who was waiting there. So instead, he used his peripheral vision and saw from the backside a curl sit right where he was going to be, where he was supposed to be drawn away from because of that seam. And he understood that. And then he sat, and you see Sudfeld kind of pump and then he's like, oh crap, that window's closed now. He just rolled out to the left and then dumped it off to a running back who ended up catching it out of bounds. So it was incomplete. There was that play. There was another play later in the second half where it was a deep horizontal crossing route off play action. He roboted again, got to the near hip, bumped him a little bit, and then just stayed underneath to where a perfect throw would have been the only way it would have been completed to this horizontal cross. So Muasau also showed me something, and I'm looking at this linebacker depth right now, and I'm like, do the Giants actually have like 3 or 4 adequate players
on that? But yeah,
no,
but let's not go too crazy.
No. Listen to me. I'm talking about adequate players. I'm not talking about guys who are going to go into the NFL and just make sticks against the Cowboys and the Eagles and make these plays against Saquon Barkley, but players who aren't, the Jalen Smiths of the world who are starting, players who actually have some development, who are going to offer some value on special teams and might have some developmental path for them to be average players in the future. And I think they have that, and possibly even more in Deontay Johnson's case, because he's a little bit more physically gifted than a player like Darius Muasau. But Muasau has this. He has the brain. He has the mentals already. And that's something that's encouraging to me.
Yeah, it is encouraging. And the Giants obviously like that about him. In addition to a lot of his leadership qualities, I think he's got a good shot to make the roster as well. But it will be interesting because now we're starting to get up there in the numbers again. And that's just something we'll have to track throughout camp. Let's talk about some other positions. I'll start with one that really stood out to me, defensive back, the 2 rookies. So there were 2 plays that really just jumped off the screen to me when I watched the film. The first was Tyler Nubin crashing downhill and taking out a pulling guard. I mean, that's absurd. And the second one was Drew Phillips around the line of scrimmage, shooting a gap and making a TFL, tackle for loss. Both of those players put that on their film at college at Kentucky and Minnesota. A physicality, a willingness in a run game to come downhill and deliver those hits. I've always believed over the last few years, the Giants DBs have been lacking in physicality. This has really been going on for a while now. They had Jabril, they had Landon. That was good when they had those guys. I think Nubin's going to add something different than McKinney does from a physicality and a run defense standpoint. And I think Drew Phillips is going to add something. Yes, Darnay Holmes gave the Giants, but I think Drew Phillips is a bigger athlete and can offer even more in that regard. Neither of them is afraid to get their nose dirty. Both of them looked explosive driving downhill and fearless driving downhill. And when you have that kind of effort and impact from a defensive back in the run game, it makes a difference. It changes your whole mentality as a defense, changes the way the offense can scheme and play against you, and it changes the feel for the offense. So I was really enthused by seeing those 2 guys work downhill last night.
There were a couple plays of just elite team defense. The one with Nubin went around Twitter. I think Bobby Skinner tweeted it, where Nubin just flew into the backfield. He picked up the pulling guard. But then at that same time, you had, I think it might have been Deontay Johnson or it was Musa, whoever it was. I put it on Twitter. I think it was Johnson. Phil promptly, and then Jordan Riley close, and it was just like perfect team defense. There was one later on too at the end of the second quarter where it was Javarius Owens as the alley defender filling Darius Muasau as the linebacker, and then Jordan Riley again closing and restricting the gap. And you see them playing as a team. You see them executing their run fits, having gap integrity. That's early. It's preseason. You're not going up against the best players, but still they're from a run defense standpoint, there were several plays where it was like, that's team defense that popped up on film. And you're seeing it from these young rookies as well. And you brought up Phillips, and that TFL was beautiful. I don't know if you saw this, though. I wanted to bring it up to you. Javarius Owens, and I was going to put this clip on Twitter. I decided against it because I believe Antoine Green, the wide receiver for the Lions, ended up getting a concussion on the play. But Javarius Owens, I think this was at the end of the second quarter. It might have been the third quarter. He flew in to fit the run, and Green was coming from the outside to block him off of an angle. Green engaged Javarius Owens, and Javarius Owens leveled Green, and Green just fell whiplash back onto his head. That sucks, right? But the amount of strength it took for Javarius Owens to to repel Green, who had a better angle to block him out of space, was very impressive. But then Javarius Owens made the tackle too. And I was just like, damn, dude, that is one hell of a play from Javarius Owens. Unfortunate that the wide receiver ended up getting hurt on it, but he's another young player here who's trying to make a roster spot, who has a ton of special teams value, who I think had a pretty good game.
Yeah, pretty good camp too, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right?
Yeah, from everything I've seen.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. He could be a back-end guy that we're not expecting and will make the roster. I'm not saying that we're not expecting to make the roster, but just somebody we haven't talked about a lot. I do feel pretty confident that the safeties are young, but they're developing. I like what Belton's been able to do. You talked about the impact he made on that bootleg design, rollout play where he took away the underneath option. Newbin coming along fast, various Owens. There are guys, there are player makers on there. And Pinnock didn't even play, but Pinnock last year put a lot of good tape out there. He really did. And we broke a lot of it down on our page, so you can check that out from last year. Corner, another story, obviously long-term. Didn't get the full look at it in this game. Any thoughts on what you saw from the cornerback play?
I thought Trey Herndon had a nice interception. He just decided to cut it back inside like a dope and fumbled the football. But it was a good spatial awareness play by him. Look, all the routes exhausted themselves. There was a guy just chilling on the sidelines like, the football is supposed to be out right now. The football is supposed to be out right now. And he was like, all right, I'm going to work back to the middle of the field because there's going to be backside because the pocket was moved. The quarterback rolled out. There's going to be backside crossers coming. Let me use my vision and undercut that. And he did so, came away with the football, ended up fumbling it. But we know there's probably going to be roster spots that can be earned through the next 2 to 3 weeks. Trey Herndon is at least a player who has some experience playing the slot and outside. So him and David Long, there could be a roster spot battle between one of those two to be a veteran cornerback on this team if the Giants don't go out and add somebody who I think they probably will. And these corners can still make the team even with that because who's a certainty at the corner position to make this squad right now, Dan? Deontay Banks, Nick McLeod, Cordell Flott, Andrew Phillips.
And you even get past that too. I mean, I think he will make the roster, but Cordell Flott, if the injury continues, that can be a possibility. Like if they can't hold him due to injury. So you're right. There is a lot of opportunity there. And there's a couple veterans. Herndon, you mentioned. I thought Trey Hawkins had a nice PBU on one of the plays.
Yeah, same here.
But, Trey Hawkins was great last year in the preseason time, so we got to be careful with that. It's so hard to play corner at the NFL level once you start to have to match up against like Tyreek Hill, for example. Like it's just so different than the guys they're seeing in the preseason. So corner's one that I think could really – I think it's point blank, Nick. Like corners – Rome wasn't built in a day. You know how it is, as Dave told us. Rome wasn't built in a day. Like Giants were going to get the whole roster turned around in one offseason. So corner, I think, will be a problem this season, just to be completely point blank with it. But I'm just hoping, again, the D-line can negate that by just getting to the quarterback fast. And we didn't get to see any of those guys in this game, but that's okay. We did get to see the second and third team defensive lines. So what were some of your takeaways from watching the second and third team defensive lines? There were a lot of standouts.
A lot of standouts. The Giants defense owned the line of scrimmage against the Lions second and third team.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome. We saw a little bit of Ryder Anderson, saw a lot of Elijah Chapman, who looked good, had a sack, should have had 2 sacks on that play, but he missed bringing Sudfeld down on that one. Explosive, is getting better with his hands, very low to the ground, plays with low leverage as well. I saw him eat a double team against the run and not get uprooted, which is definitely a positive development for him since he is a smaller school. He went to SMU player going up against professional athletes. Thought maybe he would get driven out in that kind of situation. He absolutely did not. Jordan Phillips, I actually thought I saw something from him, but I think he's a long shot to make this roster. Like I've hardly heard his name throughout training camp.
Jordan Phillips, I don't know what's going on with him.
Yeah, but like a lot of these young guys to me are a little bit more enticing. I thought Casey Rogers, the Oregon UDFA, had a solid game. I don't necessarily think he's probably going to be somebody who makes the roster, but a possible practice squad individual. Elijah Chapman is the one though that I think could have a roster spot waiting for him, especially if he has some good preseason games ahead of him. But then there's, the ghost, Boogie Basham, baby.
Oh. My God,
freaking hell of a game, dude.
What the hell? The new Boogie Basham. He's like added like 20 pounds. It looks like he's so much different looking. He's actually making plays now.
He made a bunch of plays in the run. He had 2 club swims where he separated. One of them resulted in a sack where he was able to split right through the B gap and end up recording that sack. I felt like he was jumping out. Now, this is somebody who is used to playing like actual NFL football against like first teamers. So he's feasting against second and third teamers. True. But it is at least proving that, yes, this guy's going to be on the roster. I wouldn't say that was questioned, but it wasn't a certainty either because
Based on the 2023 tape, it should have not been a certainty.
Exactly. I think I said last season something like, I don't even know if he's out there. Like, he played 12 snaps, didn't even realize it, right? Like the entire season, but he had one hell of a game.
He fits the system better too, by the way. That could also be another factor in this. It's not, going from Wink to Shane Bowen. But the guy who you mentioned, Nick, that I just is a Dan Schneider guy for me 100% of the way is Chapman. I mean, look, we've talked about this in the past, but I like interior defensive linemen to be shorter. To me, it's more ideal the shorter you are. Aaron Donald, Dalvin Tomlinson. He's a little bit shorter than those guys, but I think you have an advantage from a leverage standpoint when you're on the interior defensive line and you're shorter. And sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say they list him at 6 foot. Homie's not 6 foot, dude. Homie is not 6 foot.
But it doesn't matter. I think he wins that way, honestly. I think it helps him in a lot of ways. But he also made Bruce Feldman's freak list. Like, that's a big sign to me. He was one of the freakiest athletes with that leverage upside. And I think we've seen it on tape, and you guys have seen it at practice. So he's the most intriguing to me, and I really hope he makes this roster.
And the other two edges, look, in my article for Big Blue View, I just put the entire edge room as winners because every single one of them came through with plays. Ovi Oghofu, I think is how you say it. He is somebody who had a couple plays in the run game and was getting some pressure. And then Benton Whitley, he took the 2 penalties, which was a little bit unfortunate, but you see different movement skills from Benton Whitley. He had a ghost move where he was able to get a sack off that, where he dips the inside shoulder around a punch from the offensive tackle and then bends tightly into the pocket as he is cornering to get his hand on Nate Sudfeld, I think it was, to get that sack. You could see he has a little bit of a different twitch than some of the other edge rushers who have been second to third string edge rushers on the roster for the Giants. And then we saw Azeez too, and Azeez is going to make this team. We know that. He had a couple nice run defense plays. I think I did see him get buried on one play, and I was like, maybe his feet got tripped up. But, we love Azeez Ojulari.
I really appreciate it. I put it on Twitter. I know he got credited with 0 pressures and whatnot, but a lot of that, in my opinion, was the Lions were getting rid of the football by design really fast in the passing game. So that's just one thing that you always have to factor in with the pass rush stats. But there was one pass rush where I saw like peak Azeez. Like I saw his burst and flexibility up the arc, and then that ability to like dip and get flexibility around the arc. He went a little past the quarterback. Like the quarterback's, like he was probably here, and the quarterback's delivery point was there, fine. Like so, he didn't get the hit or the fumble or anything, but he was really close. And there will be other guys that take a little bit longer of a drop back, or he can have a little bit more time to close before the ball gets out. I know a lot of people didn't like it, and I thought some of the other reps were disappointing, I'll be honest, in pass rush from Azeez Ojulari. But that one to me stood out. It's just like what the ceiling is still there for him.
And then DJ Davidson had one play I wanted to highlight because his strength is something that we don't talk too much about. And it was a play where the tackle was blocking down on him. He was a 3 technique. And he just got his hands on this tackle, set low, put his hips into what would have been, I believe, the B gap because the guard ended up pulling up to a linebacker. And you see the tackle just get stood up like crazy. And then I'm imagining maybe somebody's feet got tangled with the tackle because DJ Davidson just drove this guy into the ground. Hard to see from the vantage point that I had on the All-22. But I did see before the feet got tangled up, DJ Davidson just stand this tackle up and then set like ideal type of defensive line technique. And I'm just looking at this defensive line room. We like Elijah Chapman. We penciled Jordan Riley in as that backup for Dexter Lawrence. I think that's safe. Nacho is safe. I think Ryder is safe. I don't know if DJ Davidson is safe. I'm thinking he is because he's a 5th round pick just from a couple years ago, and I think he has utility. But I want to see more plays like that one I was just describing. I still think he can do it. And I wanted to kind of throw that at you just to kind of get a little bit of a conversation going about a player like DJ Davidson now that we have a lot of these young UDFAs who are also making noise in camp. And we didn't even mention Timmy Horn, who was another player who didn't look bad out there.
Yeah, they have depth now on the defensive line, a lot of depth. And we know just from listening to Hard Knocks and our speculation based on what we've heard from coach interviews, things like that, that Shane Bowen wants to have a lot of these guys in his rotation. He's going to make his case at the end of camp and the end of, the preseason for the regular season. Like, I want this guy on my roster. I want that guy. I want you to give me an extra guy on the D line. And then they're going to have to come back to Dable, and Dable's going to be like, but I need this amount of tight end, and I need this amount of running back, and I need this amount on the offensive line, maybe receiver. It's going to be a big battle. The Giants actually have some big decisions to make from that standpoint. And it's not impossible that DJ Davidson could be left out based on the fact that they have depth on all these other positions and guys that they're not going to want to cut across the board. So I'll be very interested to see how that plays out as we get further in. And maybe the preseason, we still have some time, like preseason and camp is over, I think, from a public standpoint, but I think the press, you're still going to, I assume, some of these practices coming up, correct?
I got to talk with Ed about
Yeah.
that. But yeah,
Okay.
I got a busy week and then I got a bunch
Sure.
of stuff going on. But yeah.
Sure. And well, what was it like, by the way? We can wrap up with this. What was it like to cover your first game? I know it was preseason, but it was your first game covering from the media. And I've covered a few regular season, never preseason. Did you get the food? Did they set you up with the food and everything?
Oh, the food is fantastic. Yeah. It's pretty cool. You have people in the Giants front office who are like right behind the press. And like, I recognize a lot of them and they're walking around and, you know, I'm with like Jordan Ronan and a bunch of like these guys who are on the beat covering the New York Giants, and they all have relationships with certain, you know, people, and the Giants are all saying hi to him. And I'm just this new dipshit, like with this freaking mustache, just sitting there like, hey, what's up? You know, but it was really cool. It gives you a completely different perspective. There are pros and cons to being there though, Dan. Like I do like watching the game on my television because you get to hear the commentary. I think you get to see things a little bit more clearer than from where you are up there. But I also love being up there because that's where you used to be when you're a coach. You used to see the safeties rolling. You can see who is open. You can really see what the defense is trying to do. But it's like, where do I put my focus? You don't really get, I would say, as good of a vantage point on the offensive line play as much from up there. So there are pros and cons to it, but it was really cool.
Hell yeah. All right. That's all we have for today on the Big Blue Banter podcast. Keep it locked and loaded because we have a very special podcast coming up at the end of this weekend. And I will tease it now. It's a deep dive on the roster and the state of the Giants with John Schmelk. Some really great takeaways Schmelk offered from observations he had at camp and talking to the coaches and the players, stuff that you're only going to hear here. So that'll be Sunday. So keep it locked and loaded. Please, I keep forgetting to do this like a dumb A, but a dumb A, that's not a dumb E. That's a dumb A. But please like this video if you're watching still. Don't just click it and view it, like it. We need a lot more likes. We did a little bit better with my plea last episode to get more likes. I saw a big uptick in likes, but it only went from like 150 to 350, and we still had 5,000 views. I want to get to like, again, if we can get to 1K likes, it's going to make a difference for us. So please help us out. Subscribe to the page, like this YouTube page. If you're listening on iTunes, obviously, you know, please be subscribed there for auto download, even if you need to delete right after. That's how we get paid on downloads, not listens. Always keep that in mind if you want to help us kind of grow and get paid. But that's only please I'll ever ask. And, you know, mostly it's just free stuff. Like it's just stuff that will take you a few seconds, but it will help us a lot. So if you do enjoy the content, that's the way to do it. We're not going to charge you for it. We just want your likes. So
give me your likes. Give me your likes.
Exactly. So have a great rest of your weekend. I'm hoping this rain stops so I can get a couple rounds in or a round in. Yeah, it's been a week since I got to play, Nick. That's a long time in the life of Dan Schneier and this golf journey toward breaking 90. But anyway, have a great, I've done it, by the way, 3 times so far, but toward consistently breaking 90. That's the goal. Wow, it's been a while since I even said anything specific on golf. But
that's true. You've been really good.
Been very good. And luckily it's the end of the show. And so we really shouldn't hear any pushback on this. And shout out to Jay, by the way. He's an avid listener of our podcast. And I've actually golfed with him now. I think we only got out there once, but we had a great round and he's been looking to do that. And he listens to every show. And he's like, there was a moment in last night's broadcast where they were talking about golf. And he's like, the Big Blue Banter listeners better not hear this. They're going to lose their minds if they hear this. I don't know if you caught that on the broadcast. Where they were talking about golf.
I didn't. You know what? I want to run a little social experiment for those who are actually still listening on YouTube right now. Someone put a comment. Do you like when Dan talks about golf? And then if you do, just like that comment.
No, don't do this. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to.
No, someone's going to do it. It's going to be out there.
So many haters. When you start to put up like this stuff, like it's like an invitation for the egregious appetite haters that just come on and say their things. I don't want to, and I love all the listeners, but the haters I don't love as much. I don't really understand why you would hate on stuff like it. Just some things in life, Nick. I've never went to anybody's page like I listen to like Josh, any of these people I listen to and be like, this sucked because of this and this and this. You hated on this player. You suck. Like I never got the urge to ever do that on Twitter or anything. So it's just interesting to me when people do that. And I don't love it. I think if we put that out there, Nick, with the golf, it's going to be like, no, it's the worst. You're going to hear the worst of the worst, but that's like always the extremes. I don't want to like judge things and do things based on extremes.
We'll leave it to the people.
I like the non-extremes, but thanks again for obviously your guys' continued support. More content coming. We tease that, and then next week is a new week, so we will be doing that as well. Content off of that week as well. So have a good weekend. See you later.